Welcome back to Something About Tabletop. This is our second episode of our thoughts on Shadowrun, and the hour today is...
I'm Bluey Bardnut. How's it going?
And?
I am the Random Hobo, the procurer of sheds and microphones and all other things extraordinary.
Yeah, today we'll be recording it at a Hobo, and hopefully we'll be doing it more often as well, for a better quality than our first video. And of course, I am Master Blah. So yeah, thoughts on Shadowrun. That's what we're talking about today. Shadowrun was, pretty big in our role-playing, career, you could call it. We've been playing it for a while now, probably 2 years, 3 years, I think, getting close on that. Bluey here, he started with it, which is actually quite a rarity.
Yes, it was quite daunting. My first character died 3 times.
Yes, 3 times.
Yep.
We'll be talking about the lethality of Shadowrun a little bit later, but that's a big thing about the system. And Hobo here started with me in 3.5 and later rejoined me to play some Shadowrun, and it was pretty sweet.
It certainly was, even if the circumstances of us finding the system were perhaps a bit estranged.
Yeah, basically someone was going to run it, like a different version of it, and then they didn't, and then I picked it up, learning it, kind of, not really. Just learned the system, not the world. Ran it. I don't think you were neither of you were even in that campaign, which only lasted 1 session anyway. But later picked you guys back up and started playing again, which was pretty sweet. Shadowrun is probably one of my favourite systems in general. We started with 4th edition, with the anniversary edition actually of 4th, and then later transitioned into 5th edition after a fairly long time of not playing. Yeah.
Long careers, very long careers, spanning 2 generations now, at least for the terms of the rulebook.
Yeah.
Well, didn't the 4th edition come out in about the 80s?
No,
that was a very long time ago.
that was 1st edition.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
4th edition, I'm actually not too sure when 4th edition came out.
I believe it was in the early 2000s.
Early 2000s, but the anniversary edition I think was 2005,
5, I believe.
yeah.
Ah, okay.
Yeah. But now with 5th edition, which I definitely like more than 4th, it's way more accessible for any new players coming in. So hearing this and you don't know of Shadowrun, I definitely 100% suggest 5th edition. I would not suggest 4th as your first game. And definitely read up exactly what it is. Speaking of which, I'll tell you right now. So what Shadowrun is it's cyberpunk. Kind of like your Blade Runner and stuff like that. But there's also magic. Your elves, your dwarves, your orcs, your trolls, your everything from phoenixes to bargheists, vampires and all that, all intermingled into this lovely ball of fluffy, lore-y, high fantasy, cyberpunk goodness. What do you guys think about the actual setting in general? It's a bit weird.
It is extremely weird. My favourite part was when a dragon almost became president of the United States and then was promptly assassinated. Because, of course,
yeah, why not?
Can't have dragons running your country, but you can have them running your corporations. Just as good.
How'd you find it, Bluey? Coming into, I'm guessing you knew of high fantasy, token fantasy,
yes,
D&D, and then there's just Shadowrun, and you started playing with that.
I came in here treating it like an action movie, pretty much. I ignored the fantasy almost. It was just guns blazing to me.
Very John Woo sort of style.
Yeah.
Pretty much most people do. I mean, it depends on the campaign world, whether or not magic is pretty big. It's hard to get that balance of both magic and sci-fi in any one mission. It becomes fairly hard to blend. Anyway, with Shadowrun, just as touch up, I'm usually the DM of our group. Pretty much always have been. I've barely played in any games, and these guys are my players. Along with some other people, of course. It's not just 3 people. That'd be a bit weird. Mind you, it's fine if you do play like that. I mean, sometimes you can't have as many people playing Shadowrun, because I'd definitely say a thing with Shadowrun is it's not as accessible because of the intensity of the world and the rules themselves. What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, I found the hardest part about it is they say you can make any character, but after you make your character, you got to ask yourself the question, why are they doing this?
Yeah.
And that's what limits you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because if you wanted, you can have a guy with velociraptor legs, grenades for arms, and then you wonder, how does this guy live? And then you decide that he can't. And that becomes a major roadblock to making ridiculous, stupid stuff happen.
It can be. We've both seen that, especially in the inner workings of the Shadowrun world, that not everyone is well mentally balanced. So you will get these nuts, but they're not necessarily what I would call the common sort of theme for it.
They're not usually player material. They're definitely more villain material.
And I don't see generally good-willed people doing Shadowrun work. It's very dirty work.
Yeah, morally ambiguous is the word that comes to mind. There's no lawful good, lawful evil, neutral. You're just a guy with a gun or magic, and you get through the horrible world filled with corporations. And that's something that's very alluring to me because I hate the alignment system in D&D and Pathfinder and stuff. I utterly hate it. What are your thoughts on the alignment?
I absolutely despise. I feel like a lot of players in 3.5 and a lot of players from these systems with alignments get caught into the sort of trap where they define their behavior by their alignment, not their alignment being defined by their behavior. And I feel that Shadowrun's very freeing in that sort of sense because it is a very morally ambiguous dystopian set world. So you get to have all these sort of fun little experiences where, say, if you go on a mission, you find out you're actually kidnapping children for a pedophile ring. Do you care? It raises a lot of moral ambiguity about what you're doing and the rest of the motives and how much you care about it.
Yeah. And it's not like you have to be a bad guy in Shadowrun. It's just generally everyone's a little bit more gritty because they are willing to murder for a living. I mean, you murder for a living in D&D, but it's not exactly something that comes up because that's just how it is, I guess. I don't know. I
would say the society between traditional fantasy worlds are more standardized towards the medieval times where, I guess, warring was more of a part of life, whereas in the future and a lot of, even nowadays, you have a lot of people who have a lot of issues or moral complications and ethical standpoints on the nature of killing, so that with this higher level of intelligence, we've adopted this sort of more pacifist view of life, and that definitely bleeds in even to a Shadowrun.
Yeah. And a big part, also the alluring part of Shadowrun, is the game feel. And once again, with Blue ES coming into it, how did you find the game feel of Shadowrun?
I was scared. I was scared for my life. I felt like I couldn't make a single mistake because I just there was a very high stakes going on all the time and very serious characters that you'd have to deal with, and they really put you on the spot, and yeah, it was really hard. You had to make some really tough decisions. That would be the difference between life and death.
Yeah. But you really felt it more than Dungeons and Dragons and other systems that I've played. Would you agree?
I would agree, but that could just be our own jaded perceptions. You and I spent a lot of time in Pathfinder and 3.5 and these sort of other systems, and we became very meta in our ways of rolling rather than playing, in that sort of sense of roleplay. And I think it was Shadowrun where we finally sort of were able to throw those sort of shackles off of ourselves, and it became a lot more, I guess, important of what we were doing.
Well, I don't know. Let's have a look at the system itself. Like in D&D, sure, you can have 50 hit points and the guy with the greatsword can crit and kill you. But then you have a look at Shadowrun, your health is 10, your armor is, say, 10, and your body is, say, 3. Average, you're going to reduce the damage by 4. If that person gets a decent amount of hits, they can easily deal 10 damage with a sniper rifle and just kill you.
Oh, no, they can, but I felt like you could take with Pathfinder, it was a lot more oriented towards not killing you rather than what Shadowrun is. Shadowrun feels particularly lethal in all things that you do.
Yeah. If you say the wrong thing to a ganger when you're going to go pick up like a parcel at the mission, you can just get yourself killed. Like, the social encounters are very, very, very lethal. And half the time you don't want combat, which is a very interesting difference to traditional RPGs.
Not to say that combat can't be fun, it's just a deadly experience no matter when you are, no matter wherever you enter it. Like Louis said, my feelings going into the system was more of excitement because I've always wanted to play in a cyberpunk world. And so I was very excited for that, but you very quickly learn to become very paranoid and very cautious of all the decisions you make because it doesn't necessarily affect you, but also your team.
Yeah. I mean, your decisions definitely have a bigger scope because there's always this alluring, the knight errant, the police, the everyone. You know, you got to think about how you're going to look towards the Johnson, how you're going to look towards your party, how you're going to look towards your fixer. Absolutely everyone. Apart from, hey, I mean, I'm in a dark room by myself and I have my sword, I'll be fine. Doesn't matter what I do in here. Alrighty. I guess we'll do a little bit of a quick rundown of exactly what the rules are like. Because this is running a D6 system, a big difference towards D20. D6 system that uses basically you have to roll the number of hits, and to gain a hit, when you roll your dice, you have to get a 5+. So each 5+ on all of your D6s, you get hits, and then usually the hits, the target number ranges from 1 to 8. Usually around the 4 mark is usually the sweet spot, 3, 4. Or it's roll-off, so a dice pool of 20 versus a dice pool of 10. The 20 is almost always going to win. It's way less swingy than D20. Hobo, you played D20 for ages. Can you really explain that?
I feel as if with D20, there's a lot of really random swing. And a lot of the early campaigns we played in, and even in the later ones, it felt like even when you're other proficient, there was still a lot of chance for this huge sort of randomization where you can just appear to be a bumbling idiot no matter how well trained you are in it. I feel like that's less of a case in Shadowrun with the target system. I feel as if it's more... Maybe it's just a placebo effect, but because I don't do statistics, but these two here, Bluey and Blah, both are rather intelligent folks who I believe have actually done a little bit of statistical work, and I'm pretty sure we figured out it was, for the most part, a more consistent system than
so
just simply
more.
rolling a 20.
Ridiculous.
And that's what I enjoy about it.
Yeah, and you're the opposite. You went from Shadowrun to D20, so explain kind of the difference in the dice and what you saw your characters as when making that change. Because it definitely changes your perceptions of your characters.
Yeah, I hate the D20 system. I mean,
yeah,
I feel like I made a really good character, and then I roll this massive range of numbers, and I've got, well, from what I find is 10 and up, you do okay. 10 below, you don't. And it's just such a big chance to do so badly. But with Shadowrun, you've got you're rolling so many dice. If you're good at something, you've got so many number of trials to succeed, and you feel good when you're doing something because you're rolling a lot of dice. You're more likely to succeed.
Yeah, in sort of tandem with that, that's why I think I prefer Shadowrun more, because I feel like with a lot of these other systems with Pathfinder, when you start off, you can't really afford to have these sort of complex backstories because it is kind of the sort of beginning of your career, and that kind of ruins this sort of feel of being like a badass at the start, because you sort of build in towards that. Whereas a Shadowrun, you start with what I would like to call probably usually a more well-rounded character who has a lot of skills. He has a couple of skills he does alright, but if you're good at something, usually you're going to consistently actually be good at it, rather than Pathfinder or other D20 systems where it can kind of still be a swing and a miss most of the time for whether or not you're good at something.
Yeah. And speaking of which, this easily transitions to, like, the character creation in Shadowrun, I feel, is very different to a lot of other role-playing systems that I've seen. They usually use classes. So, you know, your ranger, your fighter, your wizard, and stuff like that. But what Shadowrun does, in 4th edition, you had a set amount of points, and you're spending your points on different resources like stats, skills, and you can choose a different range of them to make your character. Obviously, there are archetypes. So there's the street samurai, the combat mage, utility mage, hacker, or the decker, whichever one you use, technomancer, physical adept, stuff like that. And then in 5th edition, they have the same thing, but it's a thing called a priority table, where you basically set what you want your character to focus on more. And because of this, you can have just a wide range of different characters. So you can have a hacker face or a street samurai face, instead of having to wait for the next edition where they're going to release a charismatic fighter, like you would have to do for Pathfinder or D20, or make your own. You can make your charismatic fighter quite easily. How did that feel going from Shadowrun to D20, where it's really restricted with character creation for you, Bluey?
Well, in a way, I found it relieving because there's so much you can do in Shadowrun sometimes.
Okay.
I guess, yeah, for me, unlike going from so many limitations to unlimited limitations to unlimited limitations to limitations, it really soothes your mind. You don't have to think as much.
Yeah, Shadowrun is notorious for 4-hour character creation, while D&D can take 15 minutes, 30 minutes, depending on how in-depth your backstory. If you have no backstory, the newest edition, D&D 5th edition, I made a character in 5 minutes. Try doing that with Shadowrun. Even if you have a firm idea of what you're going to do, you still have to write that stuff down. It's going to take a while.
Yeah, it normally takes me about two or three pieces of paper of just writing down different notes and then cross-referencing them.
Yeah, it gets worse when there's lots of different books. It was so bad with 4th edition. And what's your views on character creation?
I really, really love Shadowrun's character creation because I've always been a fan and always wanted to sort of find a classless system after being in a sort of class-based system for so long
100% agree with you there.
It's very, like, the Pathfinders in 3.5 are very rigid in what you can do, and I love the freedom that, like, you could choose whatever weapons you wanted to use or no weapons, and the complete customization and the sort of depth you get to your character. I do sort of agree with Bluey, it can be completely overwhelming at times, and that it's always sometimes nice to go back to your simpler games where you're sort of locked into your archetypes, but I always find myself coming back to Shadowrun craving those options, craving that choice.
Yeah, it's extreme how much choice that you really have. It's only limited by your imagination and the world itself, because most of the time a character with grenade launchers for arms probably isn't going to get around the world very easily and is going to get arrested. This is due to the main point in Shadowrun. It's called Shadowrun for a reason. Your character lives in the shadows and has to be able to live in the shadows. So your character has to be discreet and things like that. And a big part of it is who you know. Bluey, take it up from there.
Yeah, a big part of your character creation is your knowledges and contacts. Contacts is an interesting thing. It's to do with it's a charisma-derived skill, and you have two things: loyalty and connection. Loyalty being how much they'll do for you, and connection being how many people they know and what they can get, their limitations. And this really opens up interesting avenues for your character in ways like you've got your fixer normally, and then you've got your arms dealer, and then you can make up your other contacts from that.
I feel like a lot of problems with that though is in the earlier systems we saw a lot of our older characters, and a lot of us, Slice in the Face, would usually go without. They kind of rectified that in 5th edition where you still get an amount of free points.
Yeah,
equal
3
to
times.
charisma.
3 times your charisma.
And that definitely helped increase the amount of contacts. And contacts definitely are very useful, but in 4th edition, because you had to sort of shell out extra for them, no one but the Face was really kind of doing that. But they're definitely more of a thing now.
Yeah, well, contacts are really... You can tell a group by how much they roleplay, by how much contacts they have, because a good group pretty much runs off of their contacts for missions, and it's a place where you can put your backstory, and the DM can pull from for missions for your characters to play that are relevant and exciting for them. And that's one of the really cool parts, because the party and the characters that they make drive the campaign forward, even if you have any. A cool thing about Shadowrun is you don't need to have a campaign. You can just simply have random missions chucked in with some side missions to increase loyalty and connection with their connections. And that's something that Dungeons & Dragons and other role-playing, like maybe even like Dark Heresy and stuff like that, just does not have. And that's something really awesome about Shadowrun. And also a big thing about character creation, and just in games in general, role-playing games, is always the min-maxer. And we had one in our group, and his name was Hobo. So, Hobo, tell us about how fun min-maxing is.
Min-maxing, especially in 4th edition, was probably the most cracktastic experience of my life. And I use that word sparingly because I was a man who had very little time who found himself constantly trying to push the boundaries of the limitations of the system. And this is a system where, roughly, if you're good at something, you have about, say, anywhere, if you're average, 6 dice, and if you're good at something, you usually have about 14 dice. For the longest period of time, I thought having a good dice pool was having 20 plus, and being really good at something was 30 plus.
Which you have to really stretch the rules to get that high. Like, you have to go crazy.
I was very good at it, like I said, and there's a lot of room for that in 4th edition, but you can still do it in 5th, but it's less prominent. They've definitely tightened up the rules a lot more to stop this sort of over-exaggeration. Like, in 4th edition, you could make characters who could punch harder than sniper rifles and hit harder than tanks, basically.
I think you can still do that in 5th, but you have to sacrifice your character integrity and believability of your character to do so.
It was just a lot easier in 4th edition.
Yeah.
I mean, I think Bluey knows how it sort of was as well. I'm not sure how many other characters you've sort of made like that, but I know you and I have both sometimes made a bit absurd of a character.
Yeah, I've made the dude that can fire a sniper rifle, but can't tie his shoelaces, basically.
All I know is my gun. And that's a very common character, is the sniper rifle, gun wielding character. And that's actually something with Shadowrun that I've seen a lot, is people trying to build movie characters and stuff like that. Something that's quite common, I remember Hobo used to do a lot when we first started playing, was the driver. And the driver's a really cool concept. It just sucks in game.
Yeah.
And you see so many people doing that.
It's one of those sort of things where, like, yeah, I have this really souped up car and I'm really good at driving. Sadly, no one else is ever going to be as good at driving as me, and I hope no one ever puts a bomb on my car. Also, I have to wait 3 hours for the rest of the guys to finish the mission. Why I sit in the car and, I don't know, snort Nova Coke.
Yeah. And that's the thing, you don't want to make a too focused character in Shadowrun. While you can, yeah, sure, I make the Battle Master, but the guy, at least the guy that murders heaps of people, can do multiple things in combat, and is usually good at athletics, stealthing, hopefully good perception. And even then, the demolitions expert's always very, very useful. And you generally have to generalize quite heavily.
I will say with 5th edition, one of the things that was sort of a frustration, I understand why they have it in, but I felt agility characters had a very sort of specific niche in that sort of point, where you could build a shooting character, and for the most part, you already had a lot of other good skills in that category, because you had sneaking under your agility, and you had gymnastics, and you had a lot of other good lockpicking and stealth skills under the agility tree, so it wasn't hard to simply dump a lot of stuff in agility and intuition and have a decently well-rounded character without really putting a lot of effort in.
Agility's always been incredibly powerful in Shadowrun. Most systems have a problem where one stat does too much. And it's, funnily enough, always dexterity. It's always the Mary Sue, I have a dark past, but I can do flips kind of character. The guy that can aim the gun and dodge bullets. It's always the best kind of character, while you've got the people that want to make well-rounded, tough guys and just getting utterly crapped on. It's a big problem. But, you push past it. Eventually with character creation, at least I do, and maybe other people do too, is just make character ideas and not necessarily trying to make a statistically good character. I want to make a dwarf mage or a dwarf technomancer. While it's not the best in 5th edition, it's an interesting character concept maybe, and that's why you do it.
Or you could just make the good old edge characters.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a thing called edge in this game as well. Luck's always toyed in with role-playing games. It's something that's not really seen in D&D because of how much it can be abused. But Shadowrun, luck can be utterly just super abused.
Well, when it's a finite resource, but you get it back every day for the most part, unless someone, I don't know, maybe Bluey, who likes to put his negative trait characteristic as insomnia for most of his characters, so he doesn't regenerate it properly, unless he has to make checks.
Yeah, insomnia, when you first look at it, it's a new trait in 5th edition that wasn't in 4th. It just basically means you don't regenerate, you don't heal as fast because you don't sleep much. Which doesn't seem that bad, because most characters we make anyway don't sleep that much, because they sleep during the day because they're up until 5 a.m. killing people. So you grab insomnia and then realize that it's tied to edge regeneration, and then you never get luck back and you die. Not that you've died, actually.
I haven't died ever since my first characters.
Have we had any deaths in 5th edition?
I don't think we've had any deaths, but we've had a lot of close calls. If you remember correctly, the Knight Errant.
We have.
We have?
Yeah. The troll. He got killed by Red Samurai.
Oh,
in
yes.
the docks, yeah. He had to burn edge. He didn't die, but I think that's pretty much the first burn edge. I can definitely say while the gun damage is up, I don't know whether or not, I think it might be just us getting better at it, at playing, that we're not dying as much.
That could most certainly be the case, but you got to remember that Red Samurai mission, we all almost died. That was the sort of crux where it really turned into a sort of action movie where we were all burning edge in hopes that our badass Stan could help us survive. And it was only through your good graces that we managed to walk away from that.
I think it was thematically what was meant to happen. But either way, Edge. So what Edge can do this in this game is you have a stat. It's usually 1, 2. Humans usually have 5. And you spend an Edge to make a reroll on a dice check or get rid of a thing called a glitch or a critical glitch. And this just helps you so much. Like, imagine in D20 if you can just reroll your D20 when you get your nat 1. It feels good.
Oh, it feels so good.
And also, you can do a thing called Burning Edge, which is permanently lowering your luck score forever to not die or automatically succeed in a check very well, which is not something we see much. It's usually there to not die because you just don't want to die. Especially because of character creation, how long it takes.
It's not necessarily also just... I mean, we do use it a lot to sort of survive, but a lot of the stuff we end up using it for is you spend all these hours planning, and then you get to this one vitally important task, and it becomes a case of, if you mess this up, all that planning can just go to crap, and then you just like, you know what, stuff it, just get the guns. We don't have another option anymore because we failed that check, and that's what a lot of our Edge gets used on, I feel, is a lot of our legwork that really needs to set up so that we don't have to go shooting all the time.
Yeah. Another point there, what you're talking about just then, is legwork. A massive part of Shadowrun, which isn't seen in other role-playing games, for better or worse. Legwork, pretty much, because the missions are so crazy what you need to do, like, I need to break into this corporation HQ, so the legwork may be talking to guards, finding out information, hacker hacks into there, getting floor plans and all this stuff to make sure your mission goes. And legwork can take anywhere from, like, 3 to, like, how many?
I'd say, honestly, like in the longer missions, if you're doing arcs, it could go anywhere from about 2 hours to 6 if it's really a big mission, because you can spend a lot of time. Because again, especially if you fail and your luck doesn't push you through, you have to find other avenues, and it can be really difficult to get the mission to go off without a hitch.
Yeah,
that's where contacts come in handy as well. They play a vital role in
legwork.
Yeah,
that's what they're there for. That's why the face has it. He's a legwork character.
Yeah.
Well, the face and the decker, they're the legwork characters most of the time.
You got the mage doing the astral projection, scoping out areas.
Astral projection, astral perception, all kinds of many different ways to do legwork, and it really pulls you into the mission itself. So when you finally succeed, you're like, oh, we're done. It has been done. Give me my karma money now, please.
It feels so good. Shower those cred sticks all over my face and give me karma. I mean experience. I mean, damn it, it's karma. Why do you call it karma, please?
Yeah, that's definitely something to touch on in the system. I'm not. Do you like why they call it karma? Your experience?
I don't even know why they call it karma.
No, karma is something that you gain where you get good karma if you do good. You get bad karma if you do bad, which is Hindu, if I remember correctly.
But I wouldn't call Shadowrun.
Yeah. What kind of karma are they getting? What, morally ambiguous karma?
Here, hold all of my grey karma. It's somewhere in the yin-yang. It's not in the yin-yang. I'm sorry. It's not anywhere. I just don't understand. I get that they want to be fanciful, and this is just... this is a nitpick from me, but I never liked that it was called karma. You can just call it something else, so it can still be cool. But karma wasn't appropriate.
It doesn't even necessarily have to be experience. You call it. I guess they didn't want to do what all other games do, which is the trope of experience. But it could just be. You could even call it life lessons. Like that makes sense. You spend a life lesson to get a thing.
You call it build points, to be honest.
Well, gaining build points seems a bit weird because that's something you have at start in 4th edition.
Yeah.
But karma just seems like a bad word.
It feels like an inappropriate word. I just feel... I mean, I'm not... Because we can't exactly come up with good examples right now, but I feel as if they maybe should have been a bit more time than just call it karma. It'd be fine.
Yeah. Albeit, though, in 5th edition, they have made it so that if you do good missions, where you do good things, you actually get more karma than when you do money missions. Maybe they're more spinning it towards karma. Maybe in the future, Shadowrunners will be like paladins. I doubt it.
Well, you've always got the eco-terrorists running around, but they're, again, everyone's morally ambiguous at the best.
They're going towards their cause, whatever their cause be. Because you could technically have a lawful good guard for a corporation like, say, the Krupp. But I mean, he may not be doing good acts per se, but he may be very lawful, and he may like to help people, but he happens to be in this corporation which does some really bad stuff in the shadows. I guess that's something, like we were saying before with the alignments, it's really interesting that you can have, that kind of view on things. And that's something that people really neglect in Shadowrun as well, is the lives of the guards that you're murdering constantly every day. Which sometimes gets a bit heavy, that's for sure. There's actually, I think it may be in the Shadowrun book, or it may be in another one, the 5th edition book, where it actually talks about an excerpt about someone who's been traumatized by a mage who can control people's minds, and what that did to him when he was working. It ruined him.
I used to play that mage. That ability is overpowered. You could just make a group of 5 guards just shoot themselves in the head.
Yep. I think we once had someone walk in and just be like, I overcharge a control spell, and I think we got 20 people to shoot themselves in the face.
That was one of the other issues I had with 4th edition, was that you had, you didn't even necessarily be a mage for it, you could be an adept, because you had the adept power, you could give simple commands, but if you were good at what you did, and adepts could be really good at talking because of some of their abilities, it was pretty easy to just command people to stand still or to shoot themselves in the head so that you could just mow them down like grass.
Yeah, it was ridiculously easy. But it's not like the magic system is overpowered. The magic system, I think, in my opinion, my favourite magic system of any game. You can cast spells all day, basically. It's not like an arbitrary number, like, I can cast this 2 times per day. Like, it's sometimes like in D&D, it's like, I've already cast my magic missile slot. I can only use mage armor now. And everyone's screaming at them, that doesn't make sense. What? But in Shadowrun, basically how it works is basically you take stun damage, but you can resist that stun damage or physical damage by making a simple check, which is willpower plus the stat which your type of magic uses.
Yeah, I really love the magic system. I think I love it most because it shows the physical toll that you can take, and it kind of becomes a case of how much, not necessarily an arbitrary number like you have in D&D and Pathfinder and stuff like that, but it becomes a real case of how much your body can withstand, how much your mind can withstand. And I think the best person to talk about this is not only you, but our resident mage, who usually ends up being on that sort of end of it.
Yes. I have had to use Edge to re-roll those said rolls to resist damage, because you can die from casting very powerful spells. It's you're really managing your life, and after casting a big spell, you're just like, do I want to do this anymore? I want to rest.
Yeah. Didn't you actually start with mages too?
I
did, yeah.
I had a pre-gen character at first. It was out of the book, and I didn't like it, so I just tried a mage. Yeah, I started with the mage.
Yeah. Would you say that was fairly easy to do?
Yes.
Yeah. All right.
Just to add on to that, I have to throw this into the ring simply because it's about mages, but about some people and their choices of spirit animals or the like in order to govern their usage, and how some of them are extremely playful and like to play tricks, like loading flare rounds into sniper rifles for stealth missions.
I made a fun character that put our team in danger.
Yeah, so pretty much basically in this in Shadowrun, you can get a thing called a mentor spirit, which is a quality, which we'll talk about soon. So basically what this quality does is it gives you a bonus in magic, but you usually have to abide by the spirit because you're listening to it. And what was your spirit?
It was the trickster spirit.
Yay!
It made me play pranks on my fellow Shadowrunners, which put their lives at detriment.
Didn't you also go to a kid's birthday party hyped up on Nova Coke as the entertainer?
Yes, I was tonight's entertainment.
I mean, he did pretty well. He was an illusionist. Let's not forget this.
No, but it's just a little messed up. That's like, I'm going to a kid's birthday party. I got to prepare for the Johnson's daughter's son. Oh yeah, I'm ready.
But that did make me better at what I was doing.
Until you crashed.
Yeah, until I crashed.
That was after the mission. It's okay.
Mages.
Yeah, that's actually something that's really cool. Which was the qualities, which we're going to talk about now. So a big thing with qualities that I really like, which is once again different from other systems, is just a quirk that you can put on your character, and it really makes your character your character. It's kind of a feat, but there's also negative qualities. So there's negative feats that you can get that are intrinsically part of the game. Usually they're used for min-maxing purposes to get more build points and things like that to make your character more powerful, but it's a really good way to flesh out your character in general.
Yeah, I feel that the qualities are a lot better in 5th edition. I feel as if they're a lot less. They've moved a lot further away from simply the min-maxing. They give, I guess, smaller bonuses, and they're more character defining in nature than 4th edition. 4th edition, it was a lot of, I'm going to be a changeling, and I'm going to get all these different specific qualities for changelings, and or if not, if you were playing a character, it was usually a very stock standard. I'm playing this kind of character, so I choose these kind of qualities. Whereas in this, I feel like there's a lot more. It just defines a character more than it necessarily does anything else.
I guess because you're actually more paying for them heavily in 5th edition.
Yeah, the negative qualities are a lot heavier.
Yeah, you don't need them, while you did in 4th because of the min-maxing potential. But what kind of qualities are there? Listen for us, Bluey.
Well, there's the dependent, which I really like, which could range from like an elderly, like a grandparent or something.
Uncle?
Yeah, or an uncle that calls you up here and there.
Uncle.
And there's different levels of these. There could be the
Tamagotchi.
The rare occurrence that they get in the way of a job. Or then there could be the ones that are constantly calling you up while you're trying to do a job, hassling you to do the groceries or do your homework.
Come scoop my poop.
I found them very interesting. There's other ones that affect your there's allergies, there's
addictions,
Addictions are the most common one you see. There's also amnesia, there's also black marked, and
I hate addictions because everyone takes them. It's so cheap because it's very easy to manage.
I find one of my favorite ones is bad reputation.
Yeah, bad rep most people have because it's like, oh, my character came from a gritty past where you betrayed someone. Bad rep.
I believe the one you actually liked the most for the longest period of time was distinct style out of memory on your mages.
So many distinctive style characters because basically distinctive style is your character's memorable because you look insane or you have something about you that's really, really out there. But most Shadowrun characters are already like that. So it's like, I might as well take distinctive style because the DM's going to give it to me anyway.
But that is true. I mean, I'm guilty of abusing qualities in the sense that I like a lot of my characters to have minor drug addictions or moderate drug addictions. I feel like that can transition depending. I like to have that sitting there so if my emotional connections or things get better or worse. But let's face it, for the most part, I do also like getting that free karma. But there are some times where I will, especially if it fits a character, to take a bad reputation, like an investigator I had who was horribly addicted to drugs and kind of ruined his life through that.
Yeah.
It also brings a point of character progression because you can buy off those qualities.
Experience is really weird in this game. It's different from, once again, because it's a class of system, you ask, but how do you level up? You basically have a pool of points and you can use those points to buy things. Things like extra skills and stuff like that. And it costs more to raise a skill that is already high. So you generally see a lot of characters, once they begin, start to generalize and get better at many different things, which really shows what happens in real life.
Yeah, well, it's sort of skills to meet what you're lacking, because you don't necessarily, like, even when you build what you think is a well-rounded character, it's not until you become battle-tested in the field of operation that you really begin to sort of learn what you lack, and then you start to try and improve. Then again, karma can also be used to spend on a whole bunch of other things. Resonance, magic, and your other attributes.
Yeah, it's just expanding your character as a whole, and people move in, go up levels differently. Say if someone just wants to expand their skill range because they didn't have very high skills at the start of the game, or they just want to focus on upping their main stat and just become incredibly powerful later, but because of that, they move forward slower. It's really something you have to think about because it's resources, which I guess Shadowrun is really just a massive resource management game.
I've just remembered one very important thing that we've missed about all this in the karma. we missed probably one of the most important aspects to mages and to adepts, and that is using karma to bind your fokies and your other sorts of things like
Yeah.
that.
Whoa, that is expensive work.
Yeah,
Yeah.
everything has a cost.
Well, unless you're playing a cyber and the cost is just money, which is arguably perhaps
And your
a
soul.
little less.
Let's not forget about your
Let's
soul.
not forget about your
Yeah.
golden soul you're eroding to become a half-decent killer. And then you ask yourself at the end of the day, why am I becoming a better killer? So then I can kill things better to make more money. But why am I making more money? So I can get more things to kill people.
It's a horrible cycle. And actually, a big thing which I remember with 5th edition, which they were pushing, resources and what your character needs to pay to be good at something. So we've just talked about the street samurai. The street samurai is the guy that has robot arms, and he is destroying his soul to kill people more. We have the adept and the mages. They are costing their body, their mind, and their very souls, because karma is tied to souls in the background. We have faces. I mean, what do they actually cost?
They have to spend all of their time
Money.
money and time building up connections. Because the thing is, if you can't get because you can only get it to a certain level of availability when you start the game with your connections. I think that's a 7.
7 total points in 5th edition.
Yeah, so that means either it could be anything from a 5-2 in 5 connection to loyalty or whatever. And you can't buy that in game. You have to earn it. So faces have to spend their time convincing their group that it's a worthwhile endeavor to help build their connections wrap up.
Yeah. Alrighty, so guys, you got any more final points that we want to make before we go towards the total of what we feel, personally, our upsides and downsides? Any topics you guys want to cover before we continue on?
I want to just quickly cover the intrinsic nature of Shadowrun in that, like you said, a lot of the time we get spent up in this planning stages.
Yeah.
And that it can become very complex, and that because of that, even stuff which simple missions are usually called milk runs in this.
Yeah, milk runs.
Where the legwork's usually done out for you, but even those can usually end up taking several hours to complete. There is no real simple and easy way to play Shadowrun unless you're in a third world country.
Yeah.
Where there's not a lot of hacking to worry about, where it becomes very simple. But even then, it's really hard to sort of let go with Shadowrun and just sort of kill everything and have fun in that sort of regard.
You can, but as a GM, you're really ignoring a lot of the other elements in Shadowrun, which doesn't make you bad per se, because I did when I first started, because I didn't really 100% wrap my head around it, but I feel it's more rewarding because it just forces a lot of cool roleplay with NPCs, between other characters and things like that, and I really feel this is a very roleplay kind of system. But at the same time, it's also good for people who want a number crunch, because there's a lot of numbers in the game.
Oh, there's a ton of number crunching, but in terms of roleplay, it's absolutely fantastic, because you can get gritty. You can go whatever way you want, because it's not... I feel like a lot of issue with the other, with the Pathfinder, is that because you have these set alignments, these people and these NPCs usually sort of set in that sort of way, whereas the NPCs won't really change. But I feel like in Shadowrun, even a couple wrong words can completely end up screwing you over,
Yeah.
and you can really badly wrong people really quickly, and that can be a permanent black mark, and as a runner, that's something you really can't afford to be having.
Yeah. So, I guess we're just going to start around the table. Each of us is going to talk about the downsides of the game. Bluey, you can start off.
I find that it can be very clunky at times.
Yeah.
There's just so many rules for so many things, but
A lot of modifiers.
yeah.
Get a +1 if the wind is blowing hard, and a -1 if your hat's not on straight. They're not actual rules, by the way, because you wouldn't get better to hit if the wind's on. Come on.
What is this, Shadowrun Schoolyard Edition? You can't go out to play unless you got your hat on, you have your lance pistol, please.
Oh, make sure you have your sunblock on.
Yeah, and then you gotta...
Go on, sorry, man.
Yeah, you gotta watch out for things like recoil compensation on your guns, and then you've taken damage, so now you...
There's a lot of bookkeeping.
Yeah, you just gotta start remembering all these little rules that affect things, but, I mean, that's what happens when you've got a fairly complex system. But other than that, I can't really nitpick too much on it.
Yeah. My personal quarrels with the system. There's a lot of dice. I know this seems weird, but it's all D6s, but it can just bog down the game when you're rolling 20 dice to do a thing, and then you got to count it. Well, you don't count it all up, but you find the 5s and stuff. It really slows things down, while in D20, even if you have 4 attacks, you roll 40 20s of different colours, and you can easily work out what's going on. It takes longer, which is intrinsically a part of rolling more dice, and just also the legwork. The missions are designed in a way. I mean, you can make a quick mission, but I'm not sure it feels Shadowrunning enough. I've done quick missions before. I mean, we can usually in a session, say 6-7 hour session, smash out 2 missions.
2, 3 if we're doing it really well. It really depends on how
these are
well
milk
we hit it
runs
at.
too. These aren't even big missions. These are milk runs. You can smash them out. Mind you, this is because of my personal preference, though. I didn't really do... My missions generally take one session. I like to keep it to that, keep a time on it, because I've heard of other people, like, they talk about, this one mission went through 3 sessions. That seems a bit extreme. I mean, if it's only a couple hours, but I've heard people taking 8 hours to do legwork, and as a DM, I push you guys when that happens, because it's taking up my time, your time, and the campaign's time to progress.
Legwork isn't exactly the funnest thing as a DM to sort of sit there. I mean, it can be interesting and engaging, but
Yeah.
after I think about the 4-hour mark, you kind of just want to push it along.
Yeah, 100% push.
You want to get because you're tired of dealing with this legwork. You want to get towards the next stages of dealing with like the actual ending event. And if you're especially if you're in an arc or story, you really want to start to push that along rather than get stuck and hung up.
Yeah, so you always have to put in time limits and things like that. Also, a big downside with Shadowrun, so in D&D, I guess this stems from role-playing in MMOs and things, is having good party cohesion, having the healer, having the fighter, and all that. While people think you need it for D20, in my honest opinion, you don't. Unless you're running really hard modules, usually you don't. You can get away with just being prepared. In this, you 100% need party cohesion. You need your mage, you need your hacker, you need your face, and you at least need all of those people to be decent at combat. You can do a 3-party party, but then when you have 4 people, you also got to have the street Sam. It's something that's got to... It kind of gets annoying because someone will have a character idea and they can't do it.
Yeah, with that, I feel like party cohesion, because again, like you said, with a lot of Pathfinder and like D20 games, usually, especially in like Pathfinder, there's a lot of alternative options to what you can do to healing, and you have your potions and sort of stuff like that. But when you get dropped into Shadowrun, due to the violent and the very visceral and dark nature of it, if you don't have some sort of party cohesion or understanding, then you're going to end up with a bunch of people who will most likely end up not liking each other, and then you have to deal with the constant leaving and re-entry of characters, and that can be a real pain in the ass, especially if you wanted to play a character, and that can end up fucking up your fun, or other people's fun,
because
and that
there's
can be a pain.
the social role-playing aspect of party cohesion too, I feel, is a lot larger in Shadowrun. Any thoughts on party cohesion, Blue?
Yeah, there's been some real dickhead people in parties, and I'm just like, I don't want to play with this character because they're just making the missions so much harder.
I've even done missions about Shadowrunners that are ex-Shadowrunners because their party kicked them out because they do cocaine all the time. And it's a big problem, I feel, as a DM. I don't want to have to bounce back people's ideas, but as soon as it is my character's a washout who does coke all the time, I'm afraid I'm going to have to say, no, you can't play that character. Because would you hire someone who does that?
Yeah. And I guess another problem with that is, I mean, like, usually for most DMs, like, you've managed to adapt over the time, but if everyone just shows up like we have several times in the past, when he's just like, bring characters, show up, and then we'll roll, and we've ended up with, I mean, usually there are funniest stories because they get really dumb, but when everyone shows up with all combat characters,
party,
it kind of throws out any sort of complexity, and it becomes a different sort of complexity where you try and basically get what is essentially a group of gun nuts or weapon nuts, and you're trying
murder hobos,
and you're trying to organize them into doing some semblance of a rational plan without any sort of legwork characters, and it becomes a real nightmare. I mean, again, they can be they have some of our funniest stories, but I gotta say, you can only ever do one shots with them. It can't last. It can never last.
Any other final downsides you want to point out before we move to upsides?
Just a reiteration on the dice, and not just because you have to look over all those dice, but if you have people who don't bring their own dice, then you end up with a huge problem where you've like, because I'm the one who usually has, because I have like 2 sets of like 30d6s or something like that, but even that, when you have 5 people, isn't enough, because if you have people who are good at things and they roll 20 dice each, and you're all trying to do stuff for combat to help move it along, and people don't have dice, it becomes insanely clunky, and especially when you're all rolling on the same table, and you all have the same coloured dice, it's so easy to forget whose dice and whose
Yeah.
hits are that because there's so much ambient dice lying around.
Luckily, I used to play 40k.
Oh, yeah,
That's all I can say.
Yeah.
And then you lose your dice anyway.
Oh,
Yeah.
That's all I've really got to say about it, though.
Yeah. So upsides to finalize on I mean, this game, it's just you just got to play it. You got to get the feel. It's so much fun. I haven't even played that much, but what I have played, I really enjoy it. But just from DMing, it's really rewarding because I always put twists, and it's so much fun to put twists. In D&D, twists just get stale, but in Shadowrun, it's just a part of the world. Everyone is backstabbing everyone. Everyone is lying about everything.
It keeps you guessing, and
Because
it's almost expected, but you don't know what is to be expected. Like, you know there's going to be a twist, but you can never necessarily be quite sure about what the twist is, whether the twist is going to be a party member betraying you, the chance of betraying you, or the mission just not being like it says it was. And
Yeah.
but again, like you said, it gets stale in a lot of these D&D and a lot of Pathfinder games because they're usually the same repeated and tired tropes being played out continuously.
That happens in Shadowrun all the time.
Oh, it does, but with Shadowrun, usually in Pathfinder, I find you find yourself on longer arcs than you do smaller missions, whereas Shadowrun is usually a compilation of a lot of smaller jobs, and then when the DM feels like it, usually a larger or longer arc.
Yeah. Shadowrun I also like because it's gritty. That's just something I think I'm more for the grim, dark dystopia more than anything. Dystopian-based films are probably one of my more favourite genres. It's also super rewarding as a DM and as a player. Do you guys feel that it's rewarding when you complete a mission?
Yeah, because you put in so much work,
Yeah.
and when it works, it's a great feeling.
Yeah, and especially if you have good party cohesion and everyone's having fun, like, it becomes a sort of moment where, like, those sort of crazy plans when you have to change it on the fly and it still ends up working and you end up getting up and high-fiving each other because it's so rewarding that even when things go wrong, when they go right, it can still be this amazing experience. And because you put in so much effort and legwork and because it was difficult without being unfair, that you feel so good for completing it, where I never really feel that or get that from Pathfinder anymore. I don't get that same sort of feeling of achievement.
Yeah, it's something that I've actually done because I went D&D, Pathfinder, Shadowrun, Pathfinder again. I'm running my Pathfinder games like Shadowrun games now. There's planning for my Shadowrun games. At least more recent settings that I've been doing. You have to actually plan a little bit more, or at least have to do some investigation before starting the mission. Hobo, any upsides you want to talk about?
I just think that it's a great way for people who are sort of stuck in these older systems. Shadowrun is very complex, and that can be a deterrent to some people. But I feel that it's that in its complexity that you can almost find a freedom of a roleplay character because you're no longer limited or stuck in these things. That you have so many options with gear, with magic, with character choice.
So many options
that you can be anyone or anything, and that even if you don't have to conform to this world, because the world is gritty and I do love that, but sometimes it's always nice to play that character who's trying to fight against what would be the common grain, and that can be a very interesting and a very fun thing. It can also be very frustrating, but I feel that Shadowrun is just a system in all aspects where things can feel generally really rewarding, that especially in systems where a lot of I guess the diplomacy is put heavily on rolling a d20. I guess I'm really just biased towards the Pathfinder and 3.5 setting, where I feel like a lot of you don't get quite as deep as a roleplay or diplomacy option when you get into it. I feel like there's a lot more background characters in Shadowrun because everything kind of is intricate and interlocking like that.
Yeah, mind you, in Shadowrun, it's harder to make someone change their mind.
That's kind of what I like about it.
Yeah,
though.
because people don't change their mind that easily. It's so hard.
It feels really realistic, and it's the only sort of game where I really feel like it's a necessity that you pick up at least some levels of negotiation and bluff on each of your characters. Because
normal fighters can take negotiation. It's fine.
Yeah.
Because getting 3 to 4 hits is fairly easy. All you need is 12 dice to get it consistently, and that's all you really need to be able to do it.
Yeah, and that's the other thing I like about Shadowrun is that, like, I'm a skills whore, so I love this system because you can have almost as many skills, but I feel with D&D, because of the locked-in paths and tracks, that you only ever get really a very limited amount of skills, and that always frustrated me because I always felt like I never had enough skills. In Shadowrun, I do sometimes feel like that, but I always feel like I have, when I start, almost always an adequate amount of skills that I can begin to build a wider skill set from there on if I choose.
What I really like about Shadowrun is the amount of angles that you can go about doing things. You can go in guns blazing, you can go in talking with your silver tongue, or you could go in stealthily and blow the place up. You know,
Or, like we did for the longest period of time, Mage, make us invisible.
Yeah.
And then suddenly everyone has ultrasound cameras.
Or we're inspectors.
Yeah, the we're inspectors.
Health inspector.
I had to put a stop to that. That got really annoying.
It gets annoying, but like you gotta admit, when you, it seems so strange, but when you do it for the first few times, you feel really good and you feel like clever in its simplicity, even. And then that's the issue. Over time, you kind of have to stop. As a DM, you have to sort of put a stop to the thing they're doing all the time, because you can't just let it be so easy and walk in the park. And it does force you to adapt in that sense, but that's always a good thing.
Yeah. Any other points you want to talk about the upsides of Shadowrun at all?
No, not really. Shadowrun's just a great game with a lot of freedom in it. That's what I love about it the most.
Yep.
Freedom Eagle.
Yeah. So, yep. That's pretty much it in terms of the upsides and downsides of Shadowrun. I think I'll start off with just talking about DMing it, which we haven't really covered quite yet. It's so different from DMing anything else. You guys haven't DM'd at all, have you?
I've DM'd a very minute amount of Shadowrun,
Yeah,
not a lot.
There are so many things you have to think about when making something. And also, you need to think about how angles they can attack from it, where they need to go, think about all the different contacts. Because there's so many times in Shadowrun, I don't think about that one random ability that one of my party members has that I've forgotten about. Say, someone who played a mage that is completely about evocation and fighting and blowing things up, and they just randomly have mind probe, and I have this massive hard ass that's really hard to break, and then he just goes mind probe, and it's just like, oh, forgot about mind probe.
Yeah, you have to be very...
You've got all the information now, and you've totally ruined me. And so many times I feel that Shadowrun and DMing, it's really, I've got my hand of cards, or I've got my chess pieces, and you guys are just trying to bust through my idea on what's going on. And it's really good as a DM. What I like to do to have that is that I think of all of the ideas beforehand, while they're doing the planning, and I don't really change that. So if they think up of something, I just let them do it. Like, usually, even if they're not rolling that well, maybe I'll just let them through, because your idea is really good. And rewarding ideas is a big part of my DM style and Shadowrun in general. Yeah, I just love Shadowrun. Problem with it, once again, just closing it, just finding players for it. It's hard, because not everyone knows about it, not everyone likes the setting.
Yeah, well, D&D has been a very popular thing for a very long time, and I think it's one of the older role playing games, so it's been around for a very long time. And Shadowrun's also been going through a lot of variations for a very long time, and I feel that, like, because of the sort of gritty setting, it does only sort of cater to a group of people, and especially like if you look at the angle of having to be like a GM for it to have to run a game, there's a lot you got to consider and think about. So it's perhaps a bit more heavy on the GM than it is on the players sometimes.
So much heavier, because you need to find, as a GM, well, finding a GM's hard. Like, I don't think I've met another Shadowrun GM.
I've never met another. I've met tons of Pathfinder ones and 3.5 ones, but finding a Shadowrun one is exceedingly difficult. It's
different from playing, though, because in D&D it's pretty much the same as playing as DM. I mean, I feel it's not too far of a stretch. People think it is, but it's not that hard.
No, as someone who's DM'd for 3.5 a couple of times, it's honestly just like, what should they have it around this, like, what should enemies have it around this level, how much health roughly if you played it long enough, and then it's like, what should this DC be if it's easy? It's not very hard from being, you just have to sort of look at it from, like, I guess, a player perspective, except an omnipotent player perspective. Whereas Shadowrun, it's not. You kind of have to run the whole world in that huge web.
Yeah. So, yeah, you want to close up your thoughts and feelings on Shadowrun, Bluey?
I think I've already really done that about how much I like its freedom, and yeah, that's all I can think of.
Freedom Eagle.
And Hobo, you close us off.
What? There's nothing I can really say that we haven't already said, and that
Said a lot.
Yeah, we've said a lot, and in that way, I feel kind of sad that we perhaps didn't have some more dissidence in the voice, because I don't like echo chambers, but I feel like we have gotten some very good discussion and discourse through this, and we have, for the most part, explored the ins and outs of the system, and I'm quite happy with what we've come up with, even if we are, I guess, for the most part, rather fanboyish of the system.
We are.
I like to feel as if we're not, as if we are critical where it needs to be. I know you especially. You spend a lot of time in between DMing and looking at systems and doing a lot of sort of number crunching for how things were. And you're also, like me, a very sort of minded player when it comes to power gaming and min maxing.
Yeah, I'm also a power gamer. I just haven't played enough to be a gross power gamer like Hobo here.
Yeah, and that in our sort of analysis of that, we've definitely learned a lot more about, I guess, how the system works, as a system, and the way it can be broken and exploited, and that in that sense we don't try and hide or shy away from that, because we talked a lot about how there can be a decent amount of exploitation, I feel, without necessarily telling you how to do it. Yeah.
So guys, that's Shadowrun. Totally awesome little system, really hard to get into, I find. Maybe you guys want us to talk more about Shadowrun? We can certainly do that. Leave it in the comment section below. Also, we'll be covering D&D probably next, I think, for our next episode.
Considering how much we brought it up in here, I feel it is... I guess it's certainly natural for us to bring it up a lot, because it is the second biggest competitor to the most games we've played and the most things we've had experience with. But I would definitely be willing to come back and talk about some of our Shadowrun stories if people were interested, hearing about those dumb sort of...
Yeah, we have a lot of stories, but we couldn't fit them all in.
No, we couldn't fit them all in, but if people are interested in perhaps having smaller segments where we talk about some of the planning and some of the dumb stories that we've had, I'm more than happy to come back and talk about that. What about you, Bluey?
I'd love to talk about some of the stories that we've had. We've some are very cinematic.
Yes.
So maybe a Shadowrun Stories episode is in the making, but definitely next episode of number 3 of Something About Tabletop will definitely be about D&D. So that concludes episode 2 of Something About Tabletop. My name is Master Blah. Catch you later.
I am Hobo. It was an absolute pleasure to join you too, and I hope I can become a regular and contribute some more to this show. I do enjoy having such discourse with you. It was wonderful.
And
this is Bluey Bloodnut. We're signing out.